Chapter 1. Hartlebury, the Cotswolds, Gloucestershire, October 19th, 1815. Lord Darius Alexander slid his last shilling across the tavern's rough-hewn table and sat back, making sure to exude an air of indifference. 1 shilling was a modest amount, he told himself, nothing too extravagant. It was a sum any gentleman might wager, even on cards as poor as his own. The farmer beside him folded his cards.
"Not even Mrs. Maisie's sweet ale can tempt me to play deeper,"
he boomed, plunking his tankard onto the table. Standing, he touched the brim of his cap, first acknowledging the Baron seated at Dare's right, then saluting the remarkably pretty woman who'd been silently mocking Dare all night from across the table.
"Miss Hart, 'twas a pleasure losing to you as always."
Her green eyes sparkled in the light of the tavern's many tallow lamps. "I assure you, Mr. Fawcett, I'll return in a few evenings so you can win it right back."
"Aye, if these coins could talk,"
Mr. Fawcett said with a laugh.
"Not a person who hasn't taken those winnings at one time or another."
The portly Baron harumphed.
"Some of us are serious players would like to return to the game, Mr. Fawcett."
The farmer laughed loudly again and walked away, not the least intimidated by his betters. Miss Hart shot the Baron an annoyed look before tossing her last shilling onto the pile of coins, as if she, too, had no fear of her titled neighbour. The tables had a way of expunging rank. Dare shifted in his seat, anxious now that the game was underway again. His pair of 5s was hardly a winning hand. What cards did the Baron hold? For that matter, what uninspiring hand had made Miss Hart scratch her finger lightly at a splinter poking up from the tabletop, a tell he'd spotted across the tavern almost as soon as he'd walked into the inn's dining room? Her worst cards might still beat Dare's best. "Call," Dare announced, showing his hand. Perspiration beaded on the back of his neck, but he dared not swipe at it. Lord Bamber's colour rose as he revealed his own poor hand. Dare's heart pounded. A pair of 2s, worse cards even than his matching 5s. Thank God. Dare's gaze darted to Miss Hart. A look of bemusement crossed her face before her olive-coloured eyes raised in disbelief, as though she couldn't quite credit her loss. His pulse doubled again. "Well, Miss Hart?" At his slightly mocking tone, she flipped her cards, facing them upward on the table. A pair of 4s. Dare leapt to his feet as victory raced through him. He bent over the wooden table and scooped up the pile of coins he'd just won. In each game, there was a moment when one doubted oneself. He simply must push through it. The velvet satchel that had seemed so empty a moment ago gobbled up the coins as he dropped them in one by one. He counted them as he collected them together. £1, 1 shilling. A full 12 shillings more than he'd started with, and enough to make up for the 5 he'd lost the previous night in the last posting-house. Restraint wasn't so difficult now, was it? His brothers, Tony and Roman, acted as if he were a step away from total ruination, when all he needed to do was refrain from entering deep play. "I'll be begging off too," he said, holding up the heavy satchel, communicating his truly heartfelt gratitude to the gamblers of Hartlebury. "Thank you for the game." Once again, Miss Hart seemed stunned. "You're not leaving now, are you, Lord Darius?" "Afraid I must," he said with false regret, taking a step away from a table that suddenly seemed brighter without the mismatched coins polluting its centre. The Baron set both meaty hands before him and leaned forward, his close-set eyes nearly black in the shadows of the tavern's corner.
"Play again, my lord."
Dare clenched his satchel tighter. Sweat seemed to douse his back. He took another step away. "I've promised myself I won't play so deep that present company is excluded." He shook the bag for emphasis. "As it is, I have all your money." Miss Hart's comely face shuttered, sending a chill up his spine. "He thinks we're too provincial to play with him," she said. "He thinks we have nothing left to wager." Lord Bamber harumphed again.
"You've only £1 or so in the bag, Lord Darius. Not the sort of sum you're used to in London, yet hardly the last of my coin. Go on, put it back. We've plenty of time to turn the tide tonight."
Dare gripped the satchel so tightly he couldn't have set it down even if he'd wanted to relinquish it. "If only I could stay up all night. As it is, I've a need to turn in early. Tomorrow I ride for Cheltenham. I'm sure you understand." The Baron pointed to the chair Dare had vacated.
"A popinjay like you, tired already? No need for humbug, Lord Darius. I promise to make it worth your while."
Dare's hands began to shake, the pound of his rushing pulse the only sound he heard. Worth his while? His chest tightened. What did that mean? Turning down a game of chance wasn't his usual habit, even when his opponents didn't try to lure him in with the promise of a good pot. But no, he'd made a promise to his brothers. No more IOUs. "No, thank you," he said as firmly as he could manage, his jaw aching from being clenched so tightly. The Baron flashed a crisp pound note onto the table so smoothly, Dare didn't see where it originated.
"An eye for an eye,"
Lord Bamber said, flattening his hands against the tabletop again.
"We're not so down on our luck in Hartlebury that we can't win back what we've lost."
Dare stared at the pound note. The rectangular piece of parchment appeared blindingly white in the darkness. £1. An entire bloody £1. And all he had to do was play one more game. Miss Hart watched him calmly, but he wasn't fooled. She thought him stupid for not taking up the Baron's offer. No one walked away from £1, not when they'd been betting shillings. But what would she wager? With her blonde hair twisted in a simple knot and a faded frock hugging her remarkably fine bosom, he couldn't imagine she had an entire £1 to spare. Clearly, she was in reduced circumstances. He indicated the empty space where her coins had once stood. "And you, Miss Hart, what might you use to tempt me?" Her eyes flashed at his unintended innuendo. Truly, he hadn't meant any offence, but for the first time in a long time he felt like smiling. She showed more spirit than most of the knaves he knew put together. She cast a derisive look at the sack of coins he was trying to whisk from the room. "I'm good for it, Lord Darius, I assure you. I always pay my debt." The Baron tisked and shook his head.
"That might work here, where we know where you live, but how is that to help Lord Darius? If he wins, he can't very well ride away with your promise of payment in his pocket. You must wager something he can take with him."
Dare agreed wholeheartedly. He needed ready cash, not IOUs. He'd promised his brothers no more vows. More to the point, he liked how annoyed Miss Hart looked after Lord Bamber's pronouncement. Her eyes sparked and her sun-kissed skin took on a rose-coloured flush. "One of my fine sheep, then," she said through clenched teeth. The Baron sneered before Dare had a chance to decline.
"What will Lord Darius do with a sheep? Tie it to the back of his nag and take it on to Cheltenham? Be serious, Miss Hart."
She scowled, her colour rising higher. Falling lower, actually. Dare was unscrupulously aware that her bosom was beginning to flush. "A saddle, then. He may have his choice from my tack room." The Baron's eyes gleamed long enough for Dare to catch the man's near-salivating anticipation. Lord Bamber was baiting her. To what purpose? Not a saddle. The man wanted something else put into the pot.
"A sheep or a saddle?"
the Baron crowed, confirming Dare's suspicion.
"Is this setting up a barn? No, Miss Hart. You must offer something he wants. Something we all want."
What the devil did that mean? "Perhaps my lord can speak for himself," she said through clenched teeth. "What is it you want, Lord Darius?" Oh, she was a spirited one. He found himself enchanted. Trouble was, he couldn't help her. Even if she'd been willing to wager herself, nothing could tempt him besides cold, hard coin. Not even a taste of her lovely body, which he admitted was magnificent. The tops of her blushing breasts were dusted by sunlight, as if she spent many hours out of doors, and her trim waist needed nothing but a set of light stays. "I'm afraid I'm only interested in ready money," Dare said, hoping it would be enough to dissuade her from offering up yet another pointless token. He was still unsure what Lord Bamber had been angling at, but it didn't matter if it was her delectable form. Dare didn't buy favours from women when the reverse was much more rewarding, and he certainly didn't gamble perfectly good coin on a night in bed. The best she could do for him was to withdraw from the game. His odds of winning increased greatly if he were the only one playing against the Baron. "Money!" she spat, reinforcing her dauntless temperament. "This is our only entertainment in Hartlebury, and I won't have it ruined because some coxcomb took it in his head to stop for the night."
"There now, Miss Hart," the Baron chided. "If only you'd sold your little farm to me as I've asked, you'd be flush enough to take this knob down a peg. Since you're too stubborn for your own good, allow me to buy 10 acres in the north corner, where your mineral spring is located. I'll give you £1 for them, and you may continue your play."
Her jaw tightened as her teeth ground together. "And I've told you, Lord Bamber, the land won't be separated. Certainly I won't allow you to take control of the spring that feeds my crops, nor will I sell so much as an ounce of dirt to a rotten weasel like yourself." Dare's momentary surprise at her angry rebuttal turned to utter delight. She didn't just sneer at her titled neighbour, she'd all but told him to go to the devil. But he knew now what the Baron had so blatantly been provoking. Not the sale of her luscious body, as Dare had thought, but a business transaction. He didn't have time for neighbourly antagonising or property disputes. There was an entire £1 at stake. He needed to win this hand so he could find his bed and make an early start in the morning. He must arrive for his appointment with his brother's solicitor on time. "It seems you shan't play after all, Miss Hart," he said, tossing his coin bag atop the £1 note, then retaking his seat. "Kick on, Bamber." Miss Hart reached for the discarded cards and began shuffling them before either man could claim them. "I'm playing."
"But, Miss Hart,"
the woman shot Lord Bamber a deadly look. "My last coins are in that bag. I'm not going to sit idle while some feckless peacock sets off with them. My best saddle is worth at least £1. If he does not want it, then he should be sure to lose." What logic! Dare grinned despite himself as he collected his cards face down, mutely accepting her terms. He was likely to win again anyhow. Suspiciously, Lord Bamber didn't dispute the wager either. She fanned her cards in front of her. Whether her cards or the heated exchange caused her scowl, he didn't know. Dare raised his own cards, and almost dropped them. Egad, she dealt him a near-perfect hand. He caught himself before he gave his excitement away. These cards were worth far more than one measly £1. He felt his mouth tighten at the corners. Gradually he softened his expression. Allowing his every emotion to flit across his face was a family trait he wished he hadn't inherited. But truly, he could have won 100 guineas on the same excellent hand in London. "A saddle, you say?" he asked Miss Hart indifferently, though his heart raced with anticipation. He turned his cards face down again. "If I were to raise my wager, would you be able to accommodate me with, say, the whole beast?" She, too, laid her cards face down. "Are you proposing we increase the value of the pot, my lord?" Lord Bamber's thumb pressed into the centre of his cards, denting them.
"What are you saying, Lord Darius?"
The back of Dare's neck began to perspire again, He almost took another look at his cards, just to reassure himself the hand was as good as he thought. But no, he couldn't raise his fellow players' suspicion any more than he already had by asking to increase the pot. Never mind he had nothing to increase the pot with, but the one very thing he mustn't, at all costs, wager. His sweat turned cold on his neck. Right. He should leave the value at £1. He could afford to lose that much. No more.